Welcome back to our channel. So today we're going to look at combined science questions. Okay, so this would be a very interesting video, so I advise you to actually watch to the end. In fact, I'm going to show you, let me just show you what we're going to cover. So the first question here, it's on living things. How do you define living things? So that's one of the first topics in biology and also in combined science, okay, in the biology section. Second question is about transport mechanisms. So we're going to touch not only about diffusion, the question is directly about diffusion, but we're going to touch about active transport, and we're also going to touch on osmosis and the various questions and testing angles that the examiners usually check. Okay, and then the third question is on the cross section of a leaf. This one is a very you're probably familiar with it. This cross section of a leaf, it's quite popular in combined science, both for Cambridge and for ZimSec. And so we're going to discuss a little bit on the testing angles, what they test, and what you should know. So we're not only going to discuss the direct question, but then we're also going to overlap into some of the alternative ways of testing your knowledge on this. Okay, so the fourth question, it's actually on digestion. So this one is on absorption of minerals, of absorption of nutrients. Okay, so this one will be interesting as well. And then the last question is on digestion. Okay, so we're going to start with the first question. The first question says a biologist keeps a potted plant in a laboratory. Okay, so a potted plant is just a plant. So you have sand in there. Sometimes it's just water. But then there's a plant there, so a biologist keeps a potted plant there, and then they're asking you which feature of the potted plant shows that it is a living organism. So you can actually go ahead and forget the potted plant and just ask yourself, what are the features of living organisms? How do you know that something is living? Okay, so the contrast here. So the contrast here would be, a plant that's artificial. Okay, so how do you distinguish from one that's artificial and one that's living? Okay, so this is what we're going to discuss. So there's an acronym, you probably know it. It's called MIS-NEG. Other people, they have various ways of saying the same thing, but then the acronym, it's simply something that you have to remember so that you can remember certain aspects that are kind of hard to remember. So this acronym MIS-NEG, it reminds you of the characteristics of living organisms. Okay, so M actually stands for movement here. So a living object is supposed to be mobile, it's supposed to be able to move. Okay, so R, it's supposed to respire, so respiration. So a living organism is supposed to respire. It might be aerobic respiration, it might be anaerobic respiration, but there has to be this component, this part. Okay, so S stands for sensitivity. Sensitivity, if you're asked to define this, it's the response to stimuli. Okay, so to response to a stimulus or to stimuli. Stimuli simply means a change in the environment. Okay, so change in an environment, it's called a stimulus. So any change in an environment, we call that a stimulus. So if an organism is capable of changing and changing somehow or responding to a change in the environment, we say that it responds to stimuli, so it must be living. So for example, light intensity can be a stimulus. Okay, so all living organisms react to light intensity. And then N, it stands for nutrition. So nutrition, it simply means that nutrition. So it simply means living organisms must be they must feed on something. Okay, so for us, it'd be all these nutrients that we want in our bodies. Okay, so this is something that's common for all living organisms, all non-living organisms. And then E, it should be excretion. Okay, so living organisms must be able to get rid of toxic waste. Okay, so sometimes when you digest food, some of the aspects there will be like really toxic, and sometimes depending on concentration as well, you might have to get rid of some toxins from your body. So your body is actually wired to do that, and it's something that's common for all living organisms. Okay, so excretion is an important part. And then we said respiration here. So the other R would be, reproduction. So a living organism should be capable of reproducing. Okay, so this R should be reproduction, and then this G here should be growth. So if you want to know the characteristics of living organisms, you have to remember this acronym. Okay, MISNEG. That's also how I remember it even up to now, though I did my O-levels more than a decade ago. Okay, so this is how you do it. You're supposed to know what each letter represents. Okay, and you should be able to identify now. So which feature would show it as a living organism? You're essentially looking for any one of those that's kind of true for a potted plant. So it grows larger over time. So this one must be it. Okay. So you can actually go on and then just make sure by reading all the other answers. So it has green leaves. This one is not true. Why? Because we can have an artificial plant that has green leaves. Okay. The compost in the pot dries after he waters it. This is just simply not true. Okay. And the stems contain xylem. This is simply not the indicator that they're looking for. So the indicator would be these aspects here. So here we'd go with it grows larger over time. If it grows, then we know that it's living. Let's quickly move to the next question. Next question asks us which is the correct description of diffusion. Okay, some say diffusion. So which is the correct description of diffusion? So diffusion, you should know what sets up. It's simply a mechanism of the movement of substances. But then you have to know what region they're moving from and what really moves them. You see, so the diffusion, it's we say that it's a passive process. So what does it mean to say it's a passive process? It means no energy is required. Okay, so no energy input. We don't actually, it's just something that happens if certain circumstances are met. Okay, so what are those circumstances? The circumstances are that there should be a difference in concentration. So we actually call this a concentration gradient. A concentration gradient simply means a difference in concentration. Okay, so here this is a buzzword. It's often used for diffusion, for osmosis, and we also use it for active transport. Okay, so you're supposed to know what this means. So the way that I always imagine it is that this is my gradient, this is my slope. Okay, so you can actually think of it as this one would be the ground, say. Okay, so here diffusion, how does it move? Does it move this way against the concentration gradient, or it moves down the concentration gradient? Okay, so it actually moves down the concentration gradient. So diffusion, to say that diffusion substances move down a concentration gradient, it's the same thing as saying from higher concentration to lower concentration. Okay, so diffusion, we say down a concentration gradient. Okay, so you can actually remember the D as down a concentration gradient. Okay, so active transport, remember the tip that I told you. If you are analyzing reaction, those mechanisms, those transport mechanisms, you have to understand, do you require energy? If you don't require energy, then also what's the direction of the movement? Is it down a concentration gradient? Is it in the direction of the concentration gradient, or it's against the concentration gradient? So active transport, you're active, it's actually an active process. Okay, So active means energy required. So energy is required here for active transport, okay? And also you're moving against, so you say against a concentration gradient. So I'm going to say this and then I'm going to say gradient, okay? So you're actually moving against a concentration gradient in active transport here. So let me actually rub this off and then so this is diffusion and this is active transport. So these are the differences between diffusion and active transport. You're supposed to know them, and you're supposed to be able to know as well the difference between diffusion and osmosis, okay? So diffusion and osmosis. So you're supposed to know this. The way that I want you to remember this is that osmosis, it's a specific type of diffusion, okay? So it's actually a type of diffusion, osmosis. In osmosis, we're dealing with the movement of water molecules, okay, in the direction of the concentration gradient. So down a concentration gradient, water molecules only. But in diffusion, it can be anything. It can be any substance, okay? As long as you set up a concentration gradient there, stuff is gonna move, okay? That's simply how diffusion works. It can be anything. For osmosis, it's a specific type of diffusion where we're dealing with water molecules only, okay? So that's it. So which is the correct description of diffusion? It would be if there is any energy component, just know that it's passive, so you don't require any energy. And then it's down a concentration gradient. Down a concentration gradient means in the direction of the concentration gradient. Also means from higher to lower concentration, okay? So it's actually A here. So let's move to the third question. Third question, we have this diagram here. It's a cross section. So you're supposed to be able to identify various tissues in a leaf, okay? So in the cross section of a leaf, so you're supposed to know this is palisade mesophyll or palisade tissue. This is spongy tissue. These are vascular bundles. You're supposed to know all that. These are guard cells. So the way that you'd remember it, this one's called the epidermis. So epidermis. So there's this one, you actually find it at the top and also at the bottom. So this one you'd call it the upper epidermis. Upper is it's the one at the top, okay? And then this one here, it's called the vascular. It's a vascular bundle, so you can think of it as veins of a leaf, okay? So we call them vascular bundles. So it's a vascular bundle, and you're supposed to know how to draw this. Just a sketch, nothing fancy, but you're supposed to know at least how to draw it and also how to label it, okay? So this one would be palisade. It's a palisade mesophyll. So mesophyll, it's simply tissue. So it's a palisade mesophyll here, and this one we call it spongy mesophyll. Yeah, so spongy mesophyll here. So these are your stuff, and then you're supposed to know. So this one, so this one's they're actually called guard cells. And then this opening, it's called stoma. So if there are many, you say stomata, okay? And then the other thing that you're supposed to remember is that those little things here, sometimes they don't put them as white, sometimes they actually put them as black. But anyhow, those little things, they're called chloroplasts, okay? So wherever you see chloroplasts, you actually have photosynthesis happening. That's where you find the enzymes, by the way. So chloroplasts, you find the enzymes, and you also find a concentration of magnesium as well, because sometimes they ask you some of those things, okay? So here are the greatest concentration per cell of chloroplasts. It's actually with these palisade cells, okay? So that's where you have most of the photosynthesis happening in this region here, okay? So and then the second most the second one in terms of starch production, it'd be these cells here. So these cells, they're actually spongy, so you can see that the dots, they are not as many as these. So the dots, we say that they're chloroplasts, so they are not as many. So you find that spongy cells actually produce some starch, but not as much as palisade mesophyll. Okay, and then these are called guard cells. Guard cells, just remember that guard cells also have chloroplasts, and then they produce the least, okay, the least starch of all the cells that you're seeing here. The vascular bundles, they don't produce anything. There's no starch there, and there's no chloroplasts there, so you're clear on that. This upper layer here, it's called the cuticle. Okay, so this upper layer here, it's called the cuticle. This thin layer, the one at the very top, we call it a cuticle. So you can think of it as the skin, okay, the skin of a plant. So, and you're also supposed to know what each and every part of this cross section, what they do, because some of them actually facilitate. So, for example, spongy, you see these openings here, they are to facilitate for gaseous exchange. Okay, and so let's try to answer with what we have. I think it's enough to go with. So X here, X is actually palisade, so it's either this or this. Okay, so here we're going to cancel this, we're going to cancel this, we're going to this, and then Y, this is how you do it, by the way, first way. You just identify one, it's palisade, so good. And then now you move to Y. Where is Y? It's got to be vascular bundle, so we're going to eliminate this one. So your answer would be B. Okay, so that's it. Let's move to next question. Next question says, what is not absorbed from the alimentary canal into the blood? So here you're supposed to know it's dietary fiber. Okay, it serves a different function, so it prevents constipation. Or you can say it helps in digestion. Okay, so it helps in digestion. Okay, I'm not saying it helps in digestion. So this is what dietary fiber essentially does, but then it doesn't have any function. So by the way, an example of dietary fiber, it's cellulose. The same cellulose that you find in a plant, where sometimes it has excess excess carbohydrates, or it has excess starch. It has excess, let's say, glucose, and then it converts that to cellulose. That cellulose, it's indigestible. We are not capable of digesting that, so we say that it's indigestible. That cellulose, it's also a form of dietary fiber. Okay, so it's important. And glucose, obviously, we need that. Okay, so you actually have to absorb it into the bloodstream, such that you can have different parts where you have muscles and all that. Producing ATP, which is essentially energy in the body, and then mineral salts, we need them, and then vitamin C, obviously we need those. Okay, so the last question says, which role shows where digestion occurs? So here you can start by elimination. Okay, so you can say mouth, obviously mouth, there is mechanical digestion in terms of your teeth just grinding, and then on teeth, by the way, you're supposed to know the canine, the premolar, the molar, the incisor. You're supposed to know them, and also what they do exactly, because they're actually different. Most people, they don't know. Most people, they can't even, they can't really relate to say these parts of my teeth, they do this. Okay, so you're supposed to look that up, and then just be sure. And then at some point, more obviously, we're going to cover that as well in later videos. But then this one, for it not to be unnecessarily long, we're going to skip that. Okay, so in the mouth, we have chemical and we have physical digestion. So chemical and mechanical digestion. So chemical, in terms of amylase, digesting starch into glucose. Okay, and in the large intestines, we don't have. In the large intestines, we have absorption of water. So large intestines, we have absorption of water. Okay, so we have absorption of water. Where we have the most digestion taking place, it's actually the small intestines. And the small intestines, they're adapted for digestion in so many ways. So you have there's what we call the villi. So this might be a bad spelling, but essentially these are finger-like projections. So that we should say finger-like just because they look like fingers. And whenever you have that, you actually have something with a large surface area. Okay, so because the villi, they're actually creating extra surface area. Okay, so they villi, and they also receive like copious amounts, judging from their proximity to the pancreas. So the small intestines are very proxy to the pancreas. Yeah, so and also some other aspects, just look that up, but you're supposed to know at least the adaptation. Well, how are the small intestines adapted for digestion? Okay, and you're also supposed to look up what uh, enzymes are found in the small intestines. Okay, supposed to be clear on that. So thanks so much for watching. We'll continue with questions 6 through 10 in a video tomorrow, hopefully. Okay, so this was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you as well. So thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and like and comment. Sometimes it helps other people discover our channel. Okay, persuades YouTube to actually show our stuff to other people. You've been generous so much to us, so I'd like to thank you so much for that. It's been my pleasure, and I'll catch you in the next video. Yuba out.